toxic gases, those are the bad boys, from the structure in a plan-coordinated fashion, or something along there is your textbook definition. Among the many ways that we can do this, natural ventilation. So natural ventilation is windows and doors taking wind into effect. That's simple, that's easy. We can figure that out. Stand outside, find a flag, feel the wind, open on the far side, open on the close side. That will take care of it. That's usually done after the fire. We're not usually going to deal with that during the fire. All right. And then if we go to mechanical ventilation, that means we are using some type of a machine to help us out. So that is the negative pressure ventilation, positive pressure ventilation. Again, we're going to throw in positive pressure attack in there as well. Hydraulic ventilation is also in that lump of mechanical ventilation. It's just something other than natural. All right. Now, we can do that vertically, cutting a hole in a roof, which is typically done during firefighting operations. You'll almost never do that afterwards, okay? Because after the main body of fire is knocked out, then we can open windows and doors, and we can see our way through very easily, so we don't have so much of a buildup that it's very important that we get it taken out of in that much of a hurry that we're going to do further damage to the structure by cutting holes in the roof. So, negative pressure ventilation. What did I say about this yesterday? Who remembers anything about negative pressure? Brooks?
It takes smoke out of the building by pulling it from the building out.
Okay, so it creates a negative pressure, less pressure, a draw, a pull, like pop and a straw. Okay, the pop's not going to jump into my mouth if I go to the straw. It needs to have that less pressure in my mouth to pull the soda up into my mouth. Okay, so negative pressure pulls the smoke out of the structure because it creates less pressure in the area. So what you're seeing in the picture is what we want to do. Now, will we pull some of the smoke out if we don't get that tarp all the way sealed around there? Yeah, we're going to pull some. You can stand by a fan in the hallway, and you can stand on one side of it and you'll feel the draw. The other side you'll feel the push, even though it's not sealed anywhere. So it will help a little bit. And that's kind of a tricky thing to do, especially with that canvas. But we can try to do that. But this is not typically done during firefighting operations. This is usually done after the main body of fire has been taken care of and we are just trying to get rid of smoke. All right, so requires electricity. These are electric fans. So if the structure doesn't have electricity, then we need to supply it from our trucks. So our trucks will have a way to get electricity through cord reels to the appliance to plug it in and turn it on. And it's usually just one big pull switch. It's not like a light switch where you flip it this way or that way. Typically, usually it's a pull on, push off, usually. Although, I have to think about which one I have on my truck, because I used to have two, and one of them, the switch went bad, and I couldn't find it, so we just replaced it with a light switch. But that's not what you're usually going to find. Opening around the fan must be sealed, okay, for ideal purposes, and not as effective as other forms of ventilation in removing smoke. So, how much smoke does this move in comparison to positive pressure? Or air does it move? Don't need the numbers.
Less.
Okay, this is much less, okay, than the positive pressure. So what happened in the fire service in the 1990s is once the PPV fans came out, big, bulky, you've seen them, okay, as well as the negative pressure. So what we did was we took the negative pressure fans, or smoke ejectors, off of the truck and put the PPV fan right there. Okay, so you typically are not going to find these anymore on trucks. You will on mine because it's still covered in the book. Until they stop covering in the book, then I'll take it out. But while it's still covered in the book, you're still supposed to know how to use it, but you will be hard-pressed to find these smoke ejectors for negative pressure ventilation anymore. the PPV fans just move 8 times more air, so it just makes sense. There's no application that it isn't better than a fan. All right, or this. What was the other thing? Oh, the other bad thing about these is the smoke has to go right through that fan. So when you get this back to the station, after a decent amount of smoke has passed through it, you have to turn this on one side and take that screen off. So you got to get the screwdriver and you got to take off those 8 screws on that side, get a brush and water, and scrub all of the built up carbon and soot on the blades. Put it back, flip it over, and do the same thing on the other side. So this was a very labor-intensive operation. And the smoke went right through it, as opposed to the PPV fan, where all that does is push it. It brings fresh air through. So these were a maintenance nightmare as well. All right, again, won't see them much. Guidelines: keep intake side free from obstructions, so obviously no curtains or drapes or anything like that getting in the way where it's going to affect the draw. Turn off when moving them. Okay, so if you're going to move it from one bedroom to another bedroom to pull the smoke out, shut it off in between, because it's going to be blowing fan, air, all that stuff. It's going to get your gear in there as well, so don't do that. Carry using the handles. There's 2 handles on the top. They're fairly heavy. One person could do it, and in a tight hallway in most of our homes, it probably will be one firefighter doing it. But for most of our training stuff and going up to the house and back to the house, get one on each side. It's just easier to do when you're carrying half the weight on one side of you and someone else is doing it on the other side of you. Ensure that people, clothing, curtains, or draperies are removed or secured before starting the smoke ejector, and that's true with fans as well. Avoid standing in the outlet area. So the outlet means not the electrical outlet, but where the smoke is supposed to go. If you stand in the way, then you're blocking the smoke path. All right, questions on negative pressure. All right, we will still practice it. There still might be a test question or 2 on it, but we don't do it as much. Positive pressure. So again, positive pressure, there's a positive pressure attack side of things and a positive pressure ventilation side of things. Positive pressure attack is during fire attack. So like I said before, if we can get a fan set up at the door we're going to go in, typically the front door, and we can get someone to open a door or a large window on the other side of the structure, and we time it to the point where when we're ready to make entry, somebody opens that back, someone throttles up the fan, and we go in, following the clean air, which is going to, and again, what's it going to do? It's going to push the heat, smoke, and gas out, that exhaust opening. So we are going to try to follow it to the seat of the fire. So we can get there much more quickly than thick smoke, and you can't see where you're going, and you have to kind of hunt a little bit more for it, and you're moving a lot slower because you can't see where you're going. So PPA is good. You kind of have to know about where the fire is, though, because you know where we're going to probably go in is the front door. Can be modified, but usually not. We'll talk about that later. But your exhaust has got to be on the other side of the fire. So we've got to get the smoke moving in the right direction. So PPA, positive pressure attack, and not everyone does this, so keep in mind, it's one of the things we're still playing. Works best on compartment fires. High volume fans, okay, our PPV fans, used to create higher pressure in adjacent compartments and force smoke through the exhaust openings. So instead of negative pressure, it's positive pressure. It puts pressure in. And what does that pressure want to do? It wants to find equilibrium. It wants to find balance. So it's going to find that exhaust and rush out that way. Fans must create enough pressure, so big and strong. If pressure is not sufficient, smoke will exhaust towards the intake. And if they're too close to each other. But anyway, positive pressure attack. Controlling the flow within the structure before suppression. If it's correctly done, reduces the thermal effects as firefighters perform interior operations. So again, if we do everything that we're supposed to do, we're following the clean air in. It's less smoky, it's less hot. Less gases too, but we don't care about that because we got a CDA. If it's incorrectly done, potential for rapid fire development and spread increases. Okay, so yeah, if something was going to flash and it was just missing some oxygen, it's gonna flash now because we're just adding a whole bunch of oxygen to it. So it's a little bit trickier than what it might sound like on a piece of paper to do this. That's why some departments don't, and some departments are still playing with it. And they'll wait till conditions are right before they do it. Because again, this is ahead of the hose stream. So we know the fire is going to intensify. 100%. That's a given. Throw more oxygen in the structure, it will intensify. It's just a matter of can we get there much more quickly to overcome that and make it worth our while or not. All right, so for positive pressure attack, again, just like a balloon, I can hold a balloon here and blow all day long, but the air is not going to go into the balloon until I seal it. Same thing here. We have to take this PPV fan, and your PPV fan has multiple adjustments on it. The newer ones, the old ones didn't. But as they've gotten newer and better, they've got multiple adjustments. So what we are supposed to do before we rev the throttle up, we're going to start the PPV fan. We are going to place it at the entry point of the structure, and we are going to literally go up to the door, or whatever entry point you're using, but probably a door, and you're going to feel it with your hand. And make sure that that cone of air is completely covering the door. Again, if it covers half the door, what's it going to do? It's going to go in and then it's going to go out. Okay, so you got to completely push it, just like the balloon. Okay, it's not going to fill up if I do this. It's going to fill up if I do this and force it in. So that's the only way we're going to get our effect out of this, is if we completely cover the opening with the cone of air. And then we have an exhaust that we can move that pressure that we're creating out the exhaust. All right, so that's the best way we do it. This is still PPA, so the fire would be somewhere in the middle for positive pressure attack. And for positive pressure ventilation, same thing. We want to completely cover the cone. How many people know CPR? Okay, about half of us. So when you are giving rescue breaths, what do you have to do with one of your hands? One of them's tilting. What's the other one doing?
Plug in the nose.
Plug in the nose. Why?
Because if you breathe through the mouth, it'll just go out the nose.
Because if you breathe in the mouth, it's going to take the path of least resistance. It's just going to come out the nose. And you get boogers on your cheek. Not good. All right, so pinch the nose, and now what? You're sealed here. You're sealed here. It's got to go in and do the work. It's got to go in. It's got to fill the lungs. It's got to drop the diaphragm. It's got to do that, which is what we want it to do. Bring fresh air in. Okay, and it's not fresh air, it's our exhale there, but we exhale at 16%, and that person's getting 0%. So they'd love to have our 16%. They'll be fine with that. So that's why, same thing. Pinch the nose, same thing. We're sealing it up. All right, so these are some of your homework questions and things like that. So, positive pressure attack, fire location, and exhaust inlet ratio. This is good, right? We've got, so is this supposed to be open? I think so, because the path is that way. All right, so now the air is going in under pressure. This is open. It's going to start pushing heat, smoke, and gas that way. But as we get closer and closer, we're going to be able to see there's nothing this way but a little bit of smoke. Nothing this way but a little bit of smoke. This one, that's where the big smoke is. So we're just going to follow that. And we'll get to the seat of the fire. All right, so entry, exhaust, etc., etc. And ideally, our exhaust should be at least as big as the opening. Okay, especially for positive pressure attack. They're a little bit more picky on that. For positive pressure ventilation, they're not as picky about that ratio being at least as big. And then they show some of these other ones that, let's see, what are we showing here? This is effective, which is the one we just saw. Goes in, that's open. Perfect. This is ineffective. Okay, so we don't have an exhaust there. So that air is just going in and it has nowhere to go. It's moving, but it's got no place to release. So it's going to come back into the structure. So that's a bad one. This one, effective. Okay, so this one's got two windows open. This one's got one window open. Doesn't matter. As long as it's got a way to get out. To be our 1-to-1 ratio, this is a door, then it'd be better to open both windows if we can. Okay, those can be taken out. Remember, this is during attack. So we can take these out in the hallway, or pipe hole, or an axe. That's fun to do. All right, and then this one, ineffective. Okay, because these windows aren't open, is it? No, that's it.
All those windows are open, so they're pushing the smoke towards the other windows before it gets to the fire.
What is this one doing wrong?
So it has the windows before are open, so it's just pushing all the heavy smoke into there.
Okay, too much opening. If all of these are open, then you have less pressure. Okay, I can fill a balloon easily. What if I put some pinholes in? It's going to take a lot more puffing on my end to get it to fill up, and eventually it's going to leak out, but I can overcome it with a lot more work. Same thing here. You've got some leaks in the system that you don't need. Okay, so that's why that's when it is ineffective. Good. We got it? Okay, so that's, I think, finishing up. Here we go. Positive pressure attack. Let's finish this one up. Changes the flow path to cause rapid fire development, and may cause rapid fire development. Again, that is what we're after, really. I mean, we're after the removal of heat smoking gases to make it faster for us to find the seat of the fire. But we know that adding more oxygen is going to cause it to increase. We just think that the gamble is worth it. Inside crews can be trapped. Okay, that can happen in anything. Search and rescue operations have high potential to change the flow if crews open and close doors. So again, the size of the structure, again, if you can close doors, better. You have more pressure going where it needs to go, in the front and out the back. If you have too many open doors, then that pressure has too many other places to go. So you're getting less pressure where you want it. Enter and exit from the intake only. Don't block the intake. Don't block the exhaust. Only search open compartments. Okay, so start with closest to the fire and then move from there. Water reduces pressure differences, makes PPA more effective. Okay, temperatures reduced, long path of approach. Apply water to the fire compartment as soon as the streams will reach. Okay, so, yep. So that's the whole purpose of it, is to get us to the seat of the fire quickly so we can apply water faster. All right. Questions before we jump to positive pressure ventilation. So positive pressure attack, still not sure if your department does it or not. Some do, some might do it sometimes, but not every time. If the structure is going to be a defensive fight anyway, and it's coming down like it's totally involved, then why bother pressurizing it? So there's certain conditions that are good for PPA, some that aren't. But number one, you have to have the right fans. You have to have that large fan, the PPV, typically called PPV fan, but you got to have that. And then you got to be able to create those openings. You got to have some personnel there to do that before the team goes in. If everything works well, then yeah, it can be used effectively. But now switching to PPV, positive pressure ventilation. So this is typically after the main body of fire has been knocked down, typically. High volume fans used to exhaust smoke, heat, and toxic gases after suppression. The higher pressure in the building moves smoke toward the lower pressure exhaust. Okay, so again, if I have my balloon blown up in front of me and I put a hole in this end, yeah, it's all going to go out that way. Okay, it's going to leak because that's what it does. It's got high pressure. I'm holding it here with my mouth. It wants to equalize, so it's going to go out. Less emphasis on the exhaust to intake ratio. So what that means is when I talked about positive pressure attack, we're looking for the intake and the exhaust. We're looking for the exhaust to be at least as big as the intake. When all we're doing is pushing smoke out after the main body of fire has been knocked out, we're not so worried about that 1-to-1 ratio. And you can have a window open, and it's fine. It'll work. Not as effectively, not as quickly, but it'll work. But again, we're not worried about it because suppression's done. Goal is to increase pressure to higher than the exterior, not higher than the fire can produce. Goal is to increase pressure to higher than the exterior, yes, positive pressure, not higher than the fire can produce. Is it good enough if we just say that? Goal is to increase pressure to higher than the exterior. That's what positive pressure is. I'm not confused on that one. Unless that makes sense to somebody else.